Toma Rakato. We are doing another episode of my 2-mile walk, and I decided when I was doing this, when I decided I was going to do it today, that I was really going to focus more on just a nice, basic, slow pace and a chat rather than anything else today. So I think this is the 4th or 5th time I've actually filmed my 2-mile walk, and I did decide that I wanted to chat. So we will be going slow today, and we'll be getting some stuff off my chest, maybe a little bit. I enjoy watching martial art videos. Now, last night was kind of an oddity for me. I couldn't sleep last night, so I was up all night. I didn't go to sleep until 6:30 this morning. I woke back up about 5 hours later, and just about an hour ago, I took a short nap. But while I was up all night, I did not watch any martial art videos, which is really super odd for me. But what I did do is I watched conspiracy theories and alien type things and stuff like that. Basically, that's what I did all night. And for some reason, I just couldn't go to sleep. So that's what I did. But today, of course, I got back into my martial art videos, and I just got done watching the Pride 19 fight with Don Fry and Ken Shamrock. So then I decided time to get out here, get my walk in, and even more so to get the 2-mile chat going. Alrighty. So what do I want to talk about today? Well, I'm going to start by expressing an opinion. So here's my opinion. There's no such thing as the best martial art. There's no such thing of a martial art that's absolutely effective, and there's no such thing as a martial art that's absolutely useless. Anybody who says that is mainly lying to themselves, because most people who say that really believe it, but they're lying to themselves because they are completely, in my viewpoint, incorrect. It's absolutely no secret that my personal view is that for me, and again, everybody that watches my channel should know that that's a given, and I shouldn't have to say it every time, but I do, because I don't want there to be any misconceptions. But for me, my personal opinion, I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying that it's wrong, I'm not saying that any of that, I'm just saying in my personal view, there is zero, absolutely nothing, and no Korean martial art that interests me in any way, shape, or form. And there's no martial art that has been abducted and tortured and twisted by the Korean culture that I find useful, practical, or necessary for me. Again, it's no secret. My personal opinion is that any and every Korean martial art studied today, in my view, is nothing more than a ripoff of another culture's martial art with high flashy kicks added and the name changed to a Korean name. Absolutely. In my opinion, that's it. I'm not saying there isn't a Korean martial art that I might find interesting. I'm not going to say absolute, but I will say in the 45 years of my martial art training and study, I have never found one that I find interesting, or in my view hasn't been another culture's martial art just taken and they just slap on a Korean name and add high flashy flippy kicks. Opinion. To be nice, I'll say it's in my opinion. Now, another culture that I have no interest in when it comes to martial arts is the Indian culture. Dot, not the feather. Now, if you're offended by that, I don't give a fuck. But India, there is absolutely no martial art, as I know of today, that I find to be practical or useful for me. Now, that's actually a fact. Just like when I say, for me, there's absolutely no Korean martial art that I find useful. That in truth is a fact. That may not be the same for everybody, but when I throw in for me, that changes it all. So anyway, but I'm not going to get into that because then you dive into a rabbit hole. I already did, so I've already stuck my foot in there, so I guess we might as well just go ahead and jump in a little bit. Many years ago, when I was writing a book on martial arts, I decided, because of how I was writing the book, that it was necessary for me to place some definitions according to, I don't know if it was Webster or it was another dictionary, was that Merriam or whatever, Merriam something or other. Anyway, it was a published dictionary of the English language, and I decided that I had to officially define, as they are known today, a couple words. And those couple words ended up being maybe a dozen of them when I finally got finished. But in general, now I will say this, depending on what dictionary you look at, completely different definition, depending on what edition. Now, this was probably in the early 2000s when I started doing this research, and I believe the dictionary was from the late 90s, mid to late 90s. I could be incorrect on that, but regardless, I looked up the definition of these particular words. Now, and if you look up those definitions in dictionaries today, completely different interpretations. I mean, completely different interpretations. Now, the problem that I fell into was that I was looking up the definition for belief, for fact, for truth, and opinion. I think those were the four main ones that I was looking up. Now, that did toss me into a little bit of another rabbit hole, because these words, as they were defined, at least in the early mid 90s, from the dictionary I was looking up, basically all meant exactly the same thing, but it was technically the amount of people that accepted those definitions determined what it was. Opinion is a belief that's accepted. Your belief that you accept, right? So that dealt me into belief and truth and fact and all of this. Now, when it was all said and done, every one of those words meant the same thing. The only real significant difference between the definitions of every one of those words basically was how many people accepted that as a fact or whatever. I've since kind of decided to use a different term for fact, because in truth, here we go, in truth, a fact is only something that's accepted by a large group of people. That's truly the only thing that a fact is something that a group of people accept as being true and real, which is also what an opinion is. It's just a smaller group of people accept it. A belief is basically nothing more than someone's opinion, and faith. That was another word that came about. That was a big aspect of everything. And faith is an accepted belief without the need of proof. Now, that was the definition from the dictionary I particularly was looking in. I think a lot of times they've changed recently, but that's what it was. Now, I have beliefs, I have opinions, truths, facts. I have all of that, but what I do not have is faith. Now, and I won't even delve into the religious aspects of that word. All right, this has got nothing to do with the religious aspects. By definition, faith is nothing more than an accepted truth without the need of proof. And that was the definition. The problem with that is that I don't accept anything without proof. Now, as far as the religious aspects go with that word, I have had many people tell me, "Oh, you have faith, you just maybe don't see it." And I'm like, no, not really. "Well, you have faith that gravity will hold you to the earth." I'm like, no, I don't have faith that gravity will hold me to the earth. I actually have proof of that. I've been on this planet for 57 years, and up to this point, gravity's kept me on the ground. Evidence shows me that gravity will keep me on the ground. So I don't need some sort of faith that that'll happen. Now, could that change? Yeah, sure it could. Not likely. But yeah, there's no faith. I don't believe in faith. Faith is, in my viewpoint, harmful and let's just be honest, stupid. If you're going to accept a viewpoint without the need of any proof whatsoever, well, then you're gullible, you're lazy, and you deserve everything you're going to get. That's my viewpoint. Speaking both in practical use and in a religious aspect. So anyway, I had to define these words because they were very, very important to the writing that I was doing. So You may not see the correlation to this, but now we're going to jump into my martial arts. So, I've trained a decent amount of martial arts in the last 45 years of my life. It began with karate, and it moved on to Filipino Kali. Some people in different regions call it eskrima or arnis. Filipino sword and stick fighting. Evolved into that, which I spent the majority of the 80s and 90s and even 2000s was the main focus of my training was Kali Salat. So I did that. Then I joined the Army. They tried to get me to teach their ridiculous martial art, which at the time was called Sikaran, which was a bastardized version of a Filipino kicking art that was very much like Taekwondo and a mixture of Shotokan karate. Again, not something I was interested in, not something I found to be practical or interesting. So even though I did train it with a small group of people while I was in the Army, it wasn't anything that I was really interested in, but it did give me access to train with a good group of people and in several different arts. So it was a stepping stone to something that interested me. So I did that, got out of the Army. By then, the UFC was going, and so I think the UFC got into the United States in 92 or 93, somewhere around there. I don't really quite, I'm old now, I don't remember things. It was 92 or 93, and I got out of the Army in 95. September 9th, 1995, that was my discharge date. I started working at a local juvie jail on September 10th. The next day, I had a job waiting on me, and I did that for a while. But as I said, I got out in September of 95, and in November of 95, I got a business license and opened up a martial art dojo. And at the time, the focus, it wasn't my sole art that it was evolving, and it always evolves. It's still evolving to this day. What I train is a living art. A living art is something that's not traditional. It's not set in stone. It can change when necessary. And I want Zenshin Aikijitsu to remain a living art. So anyway, but in 95, I was still mainly focused with Filipino Kali. So that was my main focus of training and teaching at the time. But I found MMA in the early days of MMA, and I knew when I saw the very first UFC that was what I was wanting right there. And it was still illegal. It was still illegal most places, but it was definitely still illegal in the state that I live in, which is Indiana. And it was difficult to find people who trained it, although I knew there were people who did. Now, I had decent connections because of my lifelong pursuit of martial art. I had decent connections with the martial art community in my town. And I was told about a group of people who met in an abandoned warehouse, and they trained and they put on fights. I'm like, well, that's what I'm looking for. So I got hooked up with them and started training with them. Now the first 6 months, I got the shit kicked out of me. I mean, the shit kicked out of me. Now, before I was able to train with them directly, Indiana started loosening up on the laws about MMA fights. Now, for a while, it wasn't really quite legal, but it wasn't illegal. There was, it was in the wording, that sort of thing. Anyway, this group could now come out into public to some degree. And they put on the first open MMA fights in my hometown. And they told me if I was interested that I could have a spot and I could fight. And I said, well, that would be fantastic. I'm doing that, yes. And I'm like, well, where can I train? And they're like, I don't know. We're the only ones that do it around here, and you're fighting one of our guys. He said, you can't come up and train with us, but you can have the fight. And I said, I'll take the fight. So I took the fight. I got armbarred in about 2.5 minutes. And I was so freaking hooked. It was freaking phenomenal. And then I started training with the group, and that became Animal House. So anyway, but I went through my MMA days, and officially, I retired in 2002 after I won the Cage Rage middleweight title. They didn't really have a lot of fighters that wanted to fight me, so it was difficult for me to get fights here in town, and I was with Cage Rage, so I stuck with Cage Rage. But I was offered after I won the title. Let me think. Was it that fight? Let me think. Man, it was either the fight that I won the title at, or it could have been 1 or 2 fights before that. I honestly don't remember. All right, so I'm a little blurry on this one. But a promoter for another organization, and I think it was Hook and Shoot, approached me about joining their organization and taking a fight. Now, he gave me a business card, and the first thing I did was I took it to the guy that trained me, and I handed it to him. I said, hey, this guy here is offering me, a spot with, and again, I think it was Hook and Shoot, but I could be wrong with that, but I'm really almost positive it was Hook and Shoot. But anyway, the guy is offering me a spot to fight with Hook and Shoot, and although this guy that trained me wasn't really my manager, I considered him my manager in a lot of respects, and I accepted his knowledge and his expertise, and I listened to him. So he looked at the card, he tore it in half, and he said, you're not going to fight for these guys. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to fight for these guys. I never questioned it. I told my wife, I said, he said no, so there's got to be a good reason, so it's no. Now, I never asked, because at the time I didn't need to ask. I trusted him, and there was no reason not to trust him. And he said no, so I didn't go to Hook and Shoot. Now, I do know, and I'll say this, I truly do not believe he had any real malice. I really don't believe that. Even to this day, I don't believe that he did it for any nefarious reasons. I really truly believe that he was doing it for my best interests from his point of view. I really believe that even to this day. Now, I do know that he had a couple guys that he really believed he could get in the UFC, because the guy I trained with, the kind of manager but training, the guy who trained me, had really good connections with the UFC. I mean, really good connections. And he had a couple guys that he really believed could get in the UFC. Now, I'm not saying I was ever that good, and I'm not saying I would have ever been that good, but it didn't really matter, because I was considerably old at the time, and Randy Couture I am not. But yeah, I didn't even have my first amateur fight until I was 35. So I was considerably older, and there was no way I was going to get in the UFC even if I was good enough, because of my age, and everybody knew that. So he focused a lot of his attention and his managerial energies on these guys he wanted to get in the UFC. Now, what would have happened if I would have left Cage Rage and joined Hook and Shoot? I don't know. Would I be, would I be in Iowa right now? Would I be in Las Vegas? Would I be rolling around in dough? I don't really know, honestly. Could have it opened up some opportunities for me that I didn't get because I stuck with Cage Rage? Yeah, I believe that, absolutely. It could have. But I don't know, and I'll never know. So I'm not going to worry about it. Now, the guys he put all of his energy in to get into the UFC, never made it to the UFC. But one of our other training partners, Julie Ketzi, she did make it to the UFC, but she left Animal House, the gym I was at. She left that, and we were all signed with Cage Rage. And she left Cage Rage and Animal House, and she went to Iowa, and she got in the UFC. Something my trainer couldn't do, because he did try to get her in the UFC a little bit, I think. Not as much as the other guys he was trying to get in, but he did work on it with her for a little while. But he was not able to get her in the UFC. But she left. She left and went to Jackson's, and bam, hit the UFC. So, I mean, honestly, if I do think about it. I'll be honest. I think about it. I don't have animosity about it, or I'm not angry about it, and it doesn't really bother me, honestly. But I do think about it. If I had said yes to Hook and Shoot, got with a different team, and who knows what could have happened. I might have made it in the UFC. I mean, honestly, it's not impossible. I could have possibly done that, but I didn't. I stayed with Cage Rage. I won their middleweight title, and there was nowhere else for me to go. Honestly, nowhere else for me to go. I had already decided that I was going to stick with Cage Rage to the end. Animal House was my training facility. I wasn't going to jump ship. I was staying with Animal House. I was staying with my trainers. I was staying with my partners, my fight partners. You know, I was staying there. And it led me. I don't want to say it led me to a dead end, but in a way it did. It really did. I had nowhere else to go. I was with Cage Rage. I wasn't gonna fight with anybody else. So you know, I won the title. Didn't have anybody to fight, and I just like, you know, hell, where can I go from here? And the honest answer was, I can go nowhere. You know, and by this time, you know, I'm in my early 40s. And I mean, who's gonna, you know, again, like I said, I'm not Randy Couture by any means, but I was in my early 40s, and to leave Animal House and leave Cage Rage Promotions was really, there was nowhere for me to go. I mean, Hook and Shoot was done. You know, even if they were still in business, which they weren't at the time, but even if they were, you know, I passed up my opportunity to go with that promotion. So, you know, I said, well, you know, that's it. But I did take a fight in 2005 to help out my promoter. I lost on points, went the full distance, but didn't win the fight. And I haven't really fought since, although I still say I've got at least one more in me. But I'll always think that, whether it's true or not.